There's been so many obstacles between these two. It just feels like at this point, maybe it's just not meant to be. Hey, what's up you guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Bree with an E, and today guys, we are back with yet another heart signal review for episode 13. I almost forgot what episode we're on because we're getting so close to the end, guys. I do want to apologize. You're seeing this video very late, in fact, because I was on vacation and I did not have time to film and get this video up on schedule, so I do apologize for that. However, I am back and we have a very juicy episode to discuss. Also, hate to change the scenery up again. I am back in my room. Is it by choice? No. So in episode 13 from the last episode, we kind of wrapped up our dates out in this getaway. I forget where they were, but they were on a getaway, on a vacation, a little mini vacation from the Heart Signal house and from everything that's been taking place. So first up to discuss in this episode, we have the breakfast scene, the breakfast incident. So very early on in this episode, the guys had a group huddle after returning from their first dates on their first day on this getaway trip. So it was then that Hushin and the other guys kind of expressed, or mostly Hushin really expressed, particularly to Mingyu, that Jiyoung was all for him and that he should just make the move. Basically telling Mingyu that, hey man, Jiyoung is feeling you, and as much as I've tried, as much as any of the other guys have tried here, she really only has her heart and her mind set on you. And remember, this was the episode we saw Mingyu kind of having second thoughts on his connection with Yisu. Was it stronger than his connection with Jiyoung? Or I don't know if it was second thoughts, but maybe him just kind of realizing just how much Jiyoung truly likes him, because for some reason, I guess it's not apparent to him, but it's been apparent to the viewers. I guess just not as much apparent to him actually being in the situation, being in the house. He didn't realize how much Jiyoung liked him, and so just finding out from Hushin and then realizing, you know, through her wanting to go on that date with him in the getaway, he really kind of realized then just how much Jiyoung likes him, and he wasn't aware of that so much before. So from this discussion that Hushin brings up, basically saying Jiyoung is all for you, I feel like he was right then and there kind of trying to express to him to, you know, hey Mingyu, make your move on her, or just trying to give him like the ins of the situation, to lead him into asking Jiyoung out, basically, because at this point I feel like Hushin just wants the best for Jiyoung. He just wants her to be happy, which stand up guy Hushin, we gotta love him. So the next morning, right, the breakfast incident, I'm gonna call it the breakfast incident because it was quite an incident. So the guys from the previous night were kind of egging Mingyu on, basically, to ask Jiyoung out. I mean, it's apparent she really likes him. I don't think the boys kind of know where he stands with her, but he does have interest in her, and I think he's expressed that to the boys before. And especially him having a conversation with, I believe it was Gyu-rae. Mingyu had a conversation with Gyu-rae, and they were talking about how, you know, Mingyu wants to ask Jiyoung out and get some more clarity from her, just kind of see where her head is at. With all of that kind of build up and the guys knowing that Jiyoung likes Mingyu and that Mingyu has a similar interest in her, I felt like they were all kind of being encouraging to him to ask her out on this date. So we get to the breakfast, the breakfast scene, and this is kind of where they're all going to decide, you know, what they're doing for the day. It's their last day on their getaway trip, and they're trying to figure out, okay, basically who's going to go out on a date today. And so, you know, little by little, I believe people start asking each other out on dates. I believe Hushin asks Jimin out on a date, so they go ahead and get ready, and then, you know, Jiwon is kind of staring down at Mingyu, wondering, hey man, putting it out there in the air, like, oh Mingyu, what were you gonna do today? And he's kind of setting it up for him to like ask Jiyoung out. Ultimately, there was so much pressure surrounding it. There were so many eyes on him. Him being an introvert, like so many people have expressed in my comments before, and me also being an introvert, I know that like it can be so crippling sometimes. I don't want to say anxiety, but in situations, you don't want all the attention on you, and it's just really awkward and uncomfortable. I get it. So I get why after all of the boys kind of were egging him on and leading him into asking Jiyoung out, it just made him feel uncomfortable, so he didn't ultimately. But also, he appears to have deeper feelings for Yisu than we thought he did, because during their date as well, he kind of confessed to her that he didn't want her to spend her last day with anyone else. It's all so confusing, but I think it all boils down to the fact that Mingyu just really does have a genuine interest in both Jiyoung and Yisu. I'm not sure where his feelings lay at the moment, like if it's more towards Jiyoung, if it's more towards Yisu. I feel like we can safely assume it's Yisu just at this point, because him and Jiyoung, it just feels like they've had a couple nice dates together, and then everything else has been sheer chaos between him avoiding her and him avoiding her. So, but Jiwon, after seeing Mingyu's continued silence and him not finally just asking Jiyoung out, he took matters upon himself to ask Jiyoung out. He got rejected, okay? I feel like it was then and there that Jiyoung kind of set some boundaries between her and Jiwon. I feel like at this moment, I think Jiwon knows that there isn't really a spark in Jiyoung's eyes there. So I'm curious to see how he'll move continuing forward, just based on the fact that she honestly like rejected him. Like, I don't know, we'll see. But as the dates fall this episode, we had Jimin and Hushin. We also had Yisu and Mingyu. We had Jiyoung and Gyu-rae, and lastly Jumi and Jiwon. So for Hushin and Jimin, their date, it was more of a kind of session for Jimin to kind of finally release the feelings she's been feeling for Hushin. It wasn't quite apparent where her feelings were falling when it came to Hushin. They had like a really cool first date together when he first came into the house, right? But then since after, she's kind of been holding her cards close to her chest, and especially with her feeling most attracted to Jiwon in this entire experience thus far, it wasn't quite apparent where her feelings fell. And even Hushin expressed that during the date when she finally revealed her feelings to him. He even felt like he wasn't aware of those feelings she was having for him, or those feelings that were developing. I think it's safe to say she no longer has those feelings for Jiwon, especially how she treated Hushin when he returned from his date with Jiyoung, that very exhausting conversation they had after dinner. She could just tell that that conversation really wore on him, or whatever conversation he had with Jiyoung. She could just tell he was just kind of down in spirits, and she really took note of that. Hushin as well was also vulnerable with his feelings and sharing the fact that he really kind of fell for Jiyoung. And as much as he, wanted to pretend that that first date with Jiyoung didn't make him fall in love right off the bat, it just wasn't the case. And this was like coming right after like him starting to grow feelings for Jimin. He kind of shared that his feelings were growing stronger for Jiyoung than they were and are for Jimin. So I'm not exactly sure where they stand at the moment, if Hushin is going to reopen that door with Jimin after going so hard and so strong for Jiyoung, and especially Jimin, is she going to really take more of an initiative? So the next date we had was Yisu and Mingyu. And Yisu at the beginning of the date was not very happy. As the whole breakfast debacle was unfolding in front of her eyes, she could tell that Mingyu really wanted to ask Jiyoung out on the date, but just for some reason couldn't. And, they had that conversation, remember, prior to this breakfast on their date the other night, about him basically expressing to her the night before that he was going to pull Jiyoung and ask her for another date. She was fully expecting to not go on a date with him that day. She was expecting him to ask Jiyoung as he planned, as he stated to her. And so she was kind of taken aback by that. And then also the fact that he then, after not being able to do it at the breakfast table, pulled her for a quick chat and asked her like in private. It just was very confusing to her, and she didn't really know where Mingyu stood. So quite visibly, she was upset going into this date because she didn't really know exactly where Mingyu's head was at after telling her the night before that he was gonna ask Jiyoung out, and basically telling her or asking her if it'd be okay if he ended up picking someone else in the end. His feelings are clearly kind of wavering from kind of what she's been used to seeing from him and getting from him, which is this straightforwardness and this directness of only going after her. As from what she's seen from Mingyu, she's felt like he's been fully invested in getting to know her, and so to finally see him kind of wavering a bit or taking a step back is quite concerning to her. So she was actually very quiet in the beginning moments of their date, although she did end up warming up to him. I feel like because he really did not have to do much to like reassure her. As they were having their conversation, and Mingyu expressed again to her how, you know, he also wanted to choose her because he wanted to make sure that they had, you know, moments together on this trip, and that he didn't want anyone else to have those moments with her. I felt kind of surprised and taken aback at that from Mingyu, because I really felt like he was maybe more so leaning towards Jiyoung at this moment, because he's been a little standoffish from Yisu, or it appears since they had that conversation the night before. So I was surprised to see exactly where his head was at with Yisu, because it felt like he was taking steps back from her, but apparently he's still moving forward towards her. So I'm interested to see exactly where this conversation will lead with Mingyu and Jiyoung after they have their date and their conversation. I'm curious as to which way Mingyu will start to lean, and I have a strong feeling it's still gonna be Yisu. I just don't think at this point it's gonna work out between him and Jiyoung, and I think that's a fair statement to make, because there's been so many obstacles between these two. It just feels like at this point maybe it's just not meant to be. But so far, our next date, we ended up having Jiyoung and Gyu-rae, and their date was a little bit interesting because it was right after Jiwon had gotten rejected from Jiyoung, and Gyu-rae was kind of like, well, wait a minute. After everyone else got kind of axed out on dates for the day, after Jiwon was rejected, he, of course, axed out, I believe it was Jumi, yes. And so after, you know, Gyu-rae and Jiyoung were sitting at the table and everyone else was getting ready for their dates, Gyu-rae took it upon himself, of course, to ask Jiyoung, you know, maybe you should go out. We could just go anywhere and just kind of clear our minds for the day. And I really like that Gyu-rae did that. I feel like he's such a thoughtful man. Even though Gyu-rae, I think at this point, knows that there's maybe the slightest of chances for him and Jiyoung to work out. I really just feel like he is just someone who just generally enjoys hanging out with Jiyoung, whether it be romantic wise or friend wise. I feel like he just genuinely enjoys her company and the way he is around her, especially. So I was glad that he was able to get her out of the house for the day, and get her out of her head, and so that they could just have a nice, comfortable, calm date where they could talk and just clear their minds together. So I really appreciated that Gyu-rae was able to do that for her. She really felt comforted by Gyu-rae's presence. As I said, he was just really there for her to kind of listen to her vent, and for her to just let things off her chest. But I felt like if anyone's gonna turn her head, it's gonna be Hushin. Our next and final dates of the episode we saw happen was Jumi and Jiwon. And I just think it's so funny looking back on the beginning episodes, how so many people early on were rooting for Jumi and Jiwon. And I was like, you know, this ship is crashing and burning because there's just friend vibes. And this date only further proved my point. I mean, there has been so much time, yes, that's transpired between these two, and since then, since their first date. So of course those initial sparks we may have seen, those potential sparks, are of course now dead. But it's just funny looking back at it, because they genuinely just give such friend vibes. I feel like this date was just them venting to one another about their situations they have in the house, especially since, you know, the people they have interest in were on dates with each other. Jumi being Gyu-rae and Jiwon being Jiyoung. So yeah, they just vented to each other about their situations they have going on in the house. And basically it was kind of like another Yisu and Gyu-rae date, where they were just kind of encouraging each other to pursue after their connections and venting to one another. So their date, there wasn't much of a date there. But that being said, that does complete the dates for the episode. This episode was interesting in so many ways, because it feels like people are now kind of starting to settle into their feelings, even though we do still have some moving parts. It seems like there could be potential for Hushin and Jimin. It seems like there could be potential for Jiyoung and Gyu-rae. We don't know exactly where Mingyu's head lies between Jiyoung and Yisu, but it certainly seems like we are coming to an end here. I would hope so. I mean, we've only got a couple more episodes left, so I would hope people are kind of starting to like finally channel their inner feelings and just really settle on how they're feeling. So at this point, let me know who you feel like are gonna end up together. Obviously there's gonna be a few singles in this house this season, just because it feels like so many people have been attracted to either Mingyu or Jiyoung, and anyone in between has just been kind of a second thought. Yeah, that completes my discussion for today on Heart Signal episode 13, guys. Let me know your predictions for the next episode. How do you feel like Jiyoung and Mingyu's conversation is gonna go? What do you feel like are gonna be the last couple standing? Who do you have like an itching burning desire to end up together? For me, I don't necessarily know if I have that, but I feel like a lot of people are rooting for Jiyoung and Mingyu. Is it practical? I'm not sure. Only time will tell, and we'll see that play out in these final episodes. But if you have not already, make sure you give this video a big thumbs up. It helps me out so much. Also, make sure to check that you are subscribed to this channel. I'm going to be reviewing Heart Signal series till the end. So if you want to see how this ends with me and see my final thoughts on everything, then stay tuned and make sure you subscribe. But with that being said, guys,